Hi, everyone. This is Rico Figliolini, host of Peachtree Corners Life. I appreciate you joining us. We have Brian Johnson, City Manager. Hey, Brian.
Hey Rico, how are you?
Good. Thanks for being with me. As usual, we're going to be going through a bit of information about new things that we haven't covered before. So there's a lot of stuff going on in the city our size. Um, Little things, big things, but everything needs attention. Um, and everyone has an opinion. So it's good to be able to go through this and yeah, it's good to go through this. But before we get there, let me just say thank you to EV Remodeling for being a sponsor of our show, as well as Vox Populi, another company that is a tremendous supporter of ours as well. And you can find their information in the show notes below. But we thank them for supporting us. Both of them are businesses located here in the city of Peachtree Corners. One of them does remodeling from design to build, evremodelinginc.com, and the other one, voxpopuli.com, does anything that you need marketing, imprinting, object imprinting, from trade shows to vehicle wraps. You know, just check them out. Links below. And if you're watching this on YouTube or any of the other video channels like Facebook, subscribe to us. I appreciate that. So let's get right down to it, Brian. I guess the first thing we talked about that would be on the list is something that my wife even was asking me about the other day, and I've had questions of it, and I've seen it. I mean, deer overpopulation in the city of Peachtree Corners. Not It's not been like this for the longest time, I think. And so, what are you hearing? What is allowed to be able to do? I know thinning of the herd was is something that people, talk about, but what is the reality of what can be done or can't be done in a county park? Because that's where a lot of them are.
Yeah, so locally, so there's a couple things to consider here is, one, if you live anywhere in Peachtree Corners, really near the Chattahoochee River corridor,
Mhm.
it is definitely as a protected corridor and serves really as a place for wildlife to go up and down because it's a water source. And so, a lot of people have seen deer in the past, but we have noticed at the city that we've had a lot more deer car interactions, if you will, in which the deer loses that battle and we end up getting a request to remove a deer, which, you know, can also get complicated because some people have deer that die in their backyard way off the road and then they'll call and say, can you pick it up? And we can't go onto private property to do that because that's a gratuity, if you will, for
Mm.
um, but if it does get close to the right of way, we will take it. So even those aren't even as cut and dry as we would like, but we have noticed that there's been a lot more deer collisions with cars and unbeknownst to us, but coincidentally at the same time, Gwinnett County asked the state Department of, I think, Natural Resources or state, game and wildlife, or one of the environmental, but I think it was DNR, to do a deer population study at Simpsonwood Park. And, in Peachtree Corners, we have a couple of areas that are undeveloped that are even more of a great location for deer to, stay around. The back of Neely Farm along the river has a
Right.
big area for the residents. The back of Riverfield,
Mm.
where the Fields Club has a really big area back there. The back of Waterside has an area along there, and then then you run into Jones Bridge Park, and then a stretch where there's not a lot of open area, and then you've got Simpsonwood Park. And so those areas are where a lot of deer are, congregating. And so Gwinnett asked the state to do a study. The state came back and said that there is a significantly, overpopulation of deer
Mhm.
in the area, And they in turn asked, and then they provided the county with a lot of reasons why that's not good. Everything from deer eating higher off the ground up, onto
Mm,
the trees.
sure.
It's got ecosystem effects,
Yeah.
coyote attraction, even, the deer that are around aren't, all of them aren't as healthy as they could be. And there's a lot of these second, third order effects
Hmm.
they laid out and said, hey, we do this elsewhere in the state, would like to be involved in, deer overpopulation, um, you know, culling of the herd.
Yeah.
And Gwinnett informed them that they can't do it at Simpsonwood Park because the county has a policy of no hunting on county-owned property. So
Well,
we didn't know any of this was going on until then the state of Georgia approached us
mm,
and said, hey, city, do you guys own any property that would be large enough for us to do, set up a controlled hunt for the purposes of culling the herd? And we don't specifically own any. Again, I ran through the organizations that really would be the ones that could say, yes, you could come out
yeah.
there or not, Fields
HOAs and stuff.
Club, Neely Farm HOA,
Mhm.
Waterside are the main ones. And so right now there is a conversation between us, the state, some of those entities, of which we might end up being a facilitator of some sort. We obviously wouldn't be doing it, it would be the state. It might be we're merely making the introduction, and then one of those property owners, if you will, says it's okay, and they coordinate it with the state, and we're just communicating to the residents. Could be
I mean,
it,
it's interesting that the county, I can understand that. I remember that rule about hunting on county property, which makes sense. You don't want that happening. But this is a control thing. This is an environmental approach to something. This is something different than banning hunting because you don't want people out there hunting. But this is something more controlled that the state would be doing, apparently. So that doesn't make sense to just say, well, we don't allow hunting and that's it. How many accidents? Do you know how many accidents like that have occurred in the city? Are there any numbers? Are there
oh yeah, we have numbers. I mean, off the top of my head, I do not know.
no
I would
problem?
say within the last 6 months, we're probably averaging probably one a week.
Wow, that many. Do you even know the number when they say overpopulation? How many deer are there out there that they've numbered in Simpsonwood? Do you know?
I didn't see the report because again, the only time we got involved is when the
Right,
county told the state,
right,
hey, thanks for doing the study and confirming what we had already thought or what had,
right.
users of the park had told us.
Yeah,
But if there's anything that's going to be done about it, it's not going to be done on our property.
yeah. That's sad because the overpopulation, I mean, they don't have a natural predator, right? Unless coyotes show up. And God knows coyotes have been reported, at least on Nextdoor with pictures and stuff, not too far from here. Like, Alpharetta, some other places north of us.
I just saw one, Rico, with my own eyes about a month ago when I was walking my dog because, I live along the river and I saw one on an evening, probably 6. I mean, it was really near sundown
Mhm.
and saw a coyote
In Peachtree
running right
Corners.
along the,
Wow. Okay.
I mean,
Then
it,
that makes
it
sense.
was it was running away from me. It wasn't, bothering, but yeah, I mean,
Mm.
so now there's some other things too. Now, I know mayor and council have had people approach them about this. It isn't as easy as we would like because for all the people who are like, look, deer are posing a problem for motorists or the ecosystem, the health of deer,
Mhm.
things like that, attracting animals like coyotes or whatever.
Yeah.
For all of those who are like, something needs to be done, there's the other ones that are like, no, let nature take its course. There shouldn't be any hunting, you
Well, that's
know.
That's the problem. Nature is not taking its course because there are no predators here.
Yeah, well, but I mean, what you get is, and then we also struggle with deer feeders. We
Yeah.
don't currently actually have a regulation prohibiting them.
Mhm.
Some people have expressed to council that that should, that they know of locations in which somebody is specifically trying to attract deer. And when you have a lot of deer, you don't just attract one or two anymore. Now you're attracting. I know there was a place at Waterside that I ended up talking to the resident that was nearby and was doing it. I rolled through there one weekend morning, right as the sun was coming up, and there was probably 30 to 40 deer in the area, and there was a big feeder. And it's just like, hey, this isn't good. And it was not too far from East Jones Bridge, so you start getting into them crossing it. So, but then others are like, I enjoy the deer coming and feeding at my location, and don't take that away. And so, it's unfortunate, but in our line of work, you know, local government management, there's never a decision that's just easy with, only one side and everybody
Yeah.
is on it. So you do have some who are like, don't do it, but that is a problem. And I wanted to bring it up just because people are talking about it.
Yeah.
What is going to be done? We are trying to facilitate. Again, we don't own property that is an area that you could do a controlled hunt.
Mhm.
There are a few organizations that are in that position that may end up agreeing with the state for them to come out and do it once or twice during hunting season type of thing. But it does appear that Simpsonwood Park is not going to be one of those locations. So we'll do what we need to, including if we have to facilitate the removal of the meat, because the controlled hunt doesn't just stop with, you know, there's a deer that's gone down, then what are you going to do with the carcass? You
Right.
want to remove it. There are programs, including ones that harvest the meat and donate it to food banks and things like that. So we're working through all of those, but we do, scientifically have a deer overpopulation problem that
Right.
does not have a natural way of getting better.
This is just a good argument for the city to take off over two public parks in its city uh property here. So and from what I understand, it wouldn't be expensive either. It'd be really cheap to buy those two pieces of property, and city could directly control everything. But I'm sure there'll be people against that also because that's an expansion of government. Which, if you want control over some things, then you got to do what you got to do. But speaking about, that, let's segue into something else too, which is a small thing necessarily, but there's pros and cons to it too, I guess. And that is that Simpson Elementary is looking to do the same thing as Pinckneyville Middle School has, which is a sign. I don't know if it's as grand as that, but they want a digital display sign possibly to go up at Simpson Elementary. Um, can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so the Simpson Elementary principal, and I don't know if it was based on PTA,
Mhm.
encouragement, or maybe the public school system, maintenance. I don't know, but anyway, she was the point person to say, hey, we would like to take our current main sign in which they put messages up there, but they have to go out and put the individual
Right,
letters
the
in to
letters.
spell it out. She was like, we would like to have a turn it into an LED display, a digital message board,
Mhm.
which functionally is, just on the surface is should be a no-brainer. A
Mhm.
school can have a sign, communicate with the
Yeah,
community in a more, you know, really a more efficient way.
right.
Because, on a computer, you can type in the message and it automatically goes out there. You can change the messages a lot, so you can put a lot more information.
Yeah.
It makes sense, but like all things, it's not so simple. oftentimes you think signs, okay, just where's the placement and, you know, does it interfere with sight lines, or cause a hazard to a motorist? And
Right.
that's the only thing you have to consider. But on LED displays, a whole different, ball game when you're talking about something that illuminates
Mhm.
and illuminating signage in which also there's flashing or the fluctuations of it because,
Right.
things change. So it's not just turning on a static light and then turning it off. Now you have all of the different, displays doing things, which, also can be a distraction to motorists. So, we've got to, we're going to help them navigate through this, but we do have, it is in a residential area with residents that live very close to that sign.
So,
And, we're gonna end up having to consider the
right.
permitting of this in a way that hopefully doesn't detract from the quality of life of the residents, but yet provides the benefit that we all know a digital message board would provide to a very important community school.
Right. So Paul Duke High School, STEM High School has a digital sign. Granted,
Yep,
that's on Peachtree Industrial Boulevard. Pinckneyville has their sign. And I get it. It's kind of bright sometimes when there's a white background to the sign
message, yep.
versus a blue or a different color background that is way brighter. The lumens on it is just so bright. Um, I'm imagining those things can be toned down a little bit
It
in a
can.
sign, and it doesn't have to be as bright as that because that's overpowering sometimes. It just depends when you can buy, right?
And this whole process went through with Pinckneyville Middle, and it wasn't without its detractors either of the people who do live there,
Yeah.
and say that it's going to interfere with their ability to either, enjoy their back or front yard, or, could be a distraction to motorists. Those are things you have to consider. It can be done,
Yeah.
but you have to regulate, also hours of operation. And there's even regulation at the state and federal level on certain roadways in which how fast the signs can change.
Okay.
Because if things start to get to where it's not just a transition to a new message, but things are flashing, that creates distractions from motorists,
Right.
and that's considered a driving hazard. So
Right.
yes, everything from how bright to how quick
Yeah.
you can change message to even hours in which you can have digital messages on there all have to be discussed.
Well,
And
and if it's, for the school purpose, right? I mean, the great thing about digital is that you can dim the lights a little bit. You can adjust the hours on it,
again,
because no one's going to be driving to school at 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock in the evening, unless there's an event that night. Different, right? But even still, like at a certain hour, it can be shut off or it can be dimmed down where you have to literally be within 40 feet of it to see the sign, maybe. So this,
nope, still can't hear you.
changed. Okay, hold on.
Oh, there we go. Now I got you back, Rico.
Okay.
Yeah, I noticed your cool light on your mic went out right when you
Yes,
went
I noticed that
quiet.
too. That's why the
So
power.
that's
That
uh, that's actually not a bad idea.
that tells it's a
Yeah,
game. I mean, that just tells me whether it's on or not.
right. But so at the end of the day, look, I think everyone would agree having that ability, a school that's a very important community school, and being able to is it's gonna make them much more productive and efficient when it comes to communicating with the community.
Right, right.
Just have to we just have to navigate this very carefully. And but that process is being done, and of course, mayor and council are very supportive of this. If, as long as we, my directive is navigate the minefield that is the local resident concerns and
The good
motorist safety.
The good part of this is that these are quality of life issues that a city can address better for its residents than a county can, I think, on a county level. So one good reason for having a city is to be
Yep.
able to address some of these issues that, really on a county level, someone voting on it from the other side of the county or something, deciding what the effects are in our city wouldn't make sense, right? Um, there is also let's the Capitol's in session, um, which can always be dangerous, but also
It
good.
is always dangerous.
Yeah, you never know what goes on there. Um, and the cities that not just people are affected, but cities are affected, right? The biggest thing is tort reform right now that Governor Kemp is looking at. Um, Southwest Gwinnett Chamber had a big talk on tort reform recently, a few months back. And one of the things I didn't know was that settlement of lawsuits can garner a lawyer as much as 40% of whatever is settled for. Um, it's not 20%, it's not 25%, it's like 40%. I thought that was ridiculous, that number. Not only that, but when you're suing, some lawyer told me once that when you're suing something on a case, you sue everyone. Doesn't matter if you think they're not involved, they're involved. You sue everyone and let the judge decide who's involved or not. Which draws in a lot of different people, right? So the city can be drawn into lawsuits that really may not be, their fault per se. Um, and I always think about lawsuits as a good way of punishing those that need to be punished a little bit because money speaks, right? But sometimes it can be carried away to crazy extent. You were sharing an example with me about Milton. So why don't you talk about that a little bit and talk about that and about what that tort reform might look like for us?
Yeah, so scenarios you just brought up, Rico, are very common for us. We get named in a lot of lawsuits. We have active, local governments always have a multitude of active lawsuits at any one time at various stages of it. And yes, the shotgun approach of suing everybody and then just letting the judge figure it out
Mm.
is one where if it happens within our corporate limits, we're more times than not just pulled into it.
Right.
Now but again, the ability to sue and having legal rights and remedies is important to have.
For sure.
So the dilemma is always where do you balance that against you know um, being overly litigious as many people are. And I could tell you horror stories of the trip and fall lawsuits
Mm.
we get where somebody literally just trips on, the world is not flat,
Right.
literally or figuratively,
Right.
and they'll sue us just because. Now, that being said, we do have a large, call it, you know, geographical area in which we are responsible. All the public right of way, sidewalks, streets, all of the property we own at City Hall or Town Green
Right.
are all ours. And so, there is some things that, general liability insurance we have to carry because there are things that can happen that we do need to be, protected. Now, there's an interesting case, though, that just came up that contributed to the governor's tort reform. That is a big case that the city of Milton had. Not, and it was I guess, a jury verdict not too long ago. And this is a case where before the city of Milton was created, when it was still unincorporated, was that Fulton?
Right.
They an owner who had a driveway coming out to one of the public streets put a planter, which
Mm.
was a truck tire turned on its side and filled in with dirt and made into a decorative kind of, you know, gateway piece to their driveway.
Mhm.
It was laid though in what was the edge, but the public right of way. It still was on, but kind of call it the shoulder of the road, if you will. This is a
Right.
2-lane road. Well, then at some point, not too long ago, a couple years, I think, but now city of Milton is a city. There was an individual, a college student who lost control of his vehicle, single vehicle accident, but hit this planter and died. I don't know if it was the impact or he was thrown from the vehicle, but he died. His family sued City of Milton, saying the City of Milton should not have let that planter be in its right of way.
Mhm.
And prior to that, cities and counties had always been like, look, we're regulating the travel way, making sure that it's free of obstacles,
Mhm.
but there are impediments in the shoulder. Probably the most common one are utility poles. Georgia Power, using them as an example, is not going to want to negotiate with every single property owner to put a utility pole on their property. So what
Mhm.
do? They come just inside of public right of way, place it as far away from the road as they can, but it is still in public right of way. And that way they only have to negotiate with essentially one entity, a public entity that owns this stretch of. So now the lawsuit, Milton through sovereign immunity and other stuff won the first one, and then on appeal, the family was awarded a $38 million verdict. And right now it's being hopefully taken up by the Georgia Supreme Court
Mhm.
because of the bigger picture impacts that this could have on any impediment in the right of way that then the city should have knowledge of.
Mhm.
And then we've got to remove it, or else we're going to be, at risk for being, liable for some lawsuit. So it's an example where, again, sometimes being overly litigious ends up creating, situations. And if this appeal stood, cities and counties would end up having to take a
Oh,
real hard look at what it permits, how it permits it, not just along the roadway, but I mean, way out of the roadway, all the way to the edge of it. And then Georgia Power is going to, and some other utilities, you have traffic cabinets at
yeah.
traffic signals, you see the green boxes
Mhm.
there, or whatever color they are. But the boxes there that are regulating the signal phase and timing of a signalized intersection.
I
Somebody hits that, do we
is
have to bury every
no.
single one of those, which will
Well, even
cost? I mean, just
but even the polls. I mean, I was I think it's a poll at by Peachtree Baptist Church, that intersection in the Y. There was a pole in the middle of a triangle thing, I think, at one point. I don't know if it's still there, but it was knocked down once. I mean, there's plenty of those types of things where cars get out of control for whatever reason. They go slamming into a pole. It's like one of those walk flashing poles.
yeah, it was from a pedestrian actuated crossing
Yes.
where you hit it and it flashes.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's that. I remember even along the median, like Peachtree Parkway. I think at one point someone had told me that they don't do hardwood trees anymore. They do what they call breakaway trees. Because if a car hits it, it should break away and not cause too much damage, right? But if you're hitting a hard oak wood tree, that person's gonna die. Now, these things will happen anyway. There was an accident on Peachtree Parkway going south. I remember seeing a car. It was crepe myrtle trees, so those are considered breakaway, I guess. It had jumped the sidewalk and went right into that tree. It was burning. There was I think there might have been a fatality, certainly injuries there. That was during last summer, I think it was.
Yeah,
Um, these things happen all the time. But if they're
do.
taking up tort reform, I would hope that they're not just looking at the reward amount, because 38 million, I mean, that's just seems to be overly blown. But how do you value a life? But 38 million is just for a city for something like that. Um, do you value, hopefully they adjust. I know it doesn't affect the city, but like the outcome of payment to lawyers, they should really restrict the amount of money being paid out to lawyers? Because that 38 million, without doubt, is at least 30% of that is going to the lawyer, to the law firm that's suing. Which will be interesting about tort reform because apparently most of the capital is made up of lawyers or consultants. So it'd be interesting if they actually do anything.
And again, they serve a purpose, but
Yeah.
I've had this in other cities I've managed too. An attorney will get with somebody who's usually has a disability that requires them to be in a wheelchair,
Mhm.
and they'll really, it's not done right. It's essentially they'll conspire.
Mhm.
And by that, I mean the person in the wheelchair will seek out instances in which a local government is not meeting code to the
Right.
exact letter. And then the attorney will reach out on behalf of his or her client
Yeah.
and say, you're in, violation of the American with Disabilities Act. And if you don't do something within a certain period of time, we're going to sue.
Mm.
And so then, you got, now again, ADA exists for a legitimate reason
Absolutely.
and, all that kind of stuff. But, these would be people who I remember one of them, we had a parking lot that had the handicap spot, and then you have that hatched area next to it so that you could load a wheelchair.
Right.
The slope of the parking lot was 2 degrees off
Mm.
the, and required us to dig up a whole section of it just to move it 2 degrees.
Yeah. Interesting.
So,
There's, I think Target and Publix redid their handicap and adjusted it. It's very way different than it used to be before, and probably for some of the same reasons, the elevation issue and stuff. Um, and I know the town green part where the Fort of
Fort
Payne,
Payne, yeah.
Fort Payne, Fort of Payne, Fort Payne. Um, the fencing had to go around that allows only one entrance
Yep.
because now there's signage there saying if you allow your kids in here or whoever comes in here needs to understand that you could get hurt if you're not, doing it the right way. And the insurance company had told us, right? Had told the city that
Yeah. I mean, it was like, look, you have created an obstacle course
yes,
and it has advanced stuff. You can't have it unsecure. So we have only one entrance. And then, if you're not with a parent or over 18 years old yourself, you're not supposed to be in there. And so if you just ignore it and get hurt, then our insurance feels like we've mitigated our risk
right.
because we, told them, hey, you're not supposed to be here without, we also have instructional videos on how to do these things that you can use and everything we can do, but there's still some people who will do it. I mean, again, we live in a litigious society. We
Right.
all get it, but there are some things that we got to be careful. In this case, it obviously the city of Milton case isn't ours, but it will impact us greatly if it is upheld.
Sure. Like a lot of legislation that goes on there that affects cities, construction material, what things can be built with, whether it's steel or wood, and if it's over. I mean, I remember that was a piece of legislation at one point. I think one city had that you couldn't build something taller than 3 stories without using steel or metal. Um, and that was struck down, apparently,
It
because,
was because the timber lobby
yes, yes.
in the
But
state, like Georgia
yeah.
Pacific, was like, no, 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 we want to still be able to use wood, up to, I think you can go up to 4 stories with wood before you,
Why build
federal
some,
code is steel.
yeah, why build something that can last for 100 years? Um,
Right. And there's even some, I mean, this session, right now,
mhm.
procurement law in Georgia is if a project exceeds $100,000, you
Yeah.
have to bid it no matter what. And it hasn't been changed since 2000.
Wow.
And we've
Okay.
had inflation since 2000. It's
Yeah.
really hard for us to find projects that are less than 100,000 that are of any. And so it just slows things up because then you got to bid it out. And you have to award it to the lowest qualified bidder.
Hmm.
And so you run into, problems sometimes where companies are underbidding to get the job with the knowledge they're not going to be able to finish it with that amount. So they try to change order you to death,
Yes, yes. Or get you to
but
the,
the legislation, just real quick, is to raise that value to 250,000 before you have to bid
that
it,
makes
which,
that makes
yeah,
sense because I've seen projects where they do come in and low bid, and then you're sort of forced
yeah,
to pay the rest of it because you need it done. It's not like you
yeah,
go from scratch again.
yeah,
We'll hold them to it too, because even with a bond or something, it's just not going to happen.
yeah.
Some of the other legislation, I think another piece was about annexation. So in brief, how would that
Yeah,
affect us?
so there's still, things happening at the Capitol that are removing a city's ability to annex an area in which the people who live in that area or own property in that area want to get annexed into the city,
Hmm.
that other parties could stop them. There's legislation making it to where, counties or in Georgia, potentially almost could get to the point where they could stop an annexation, which, in a state that allows counties to charge a millage rate just to the unincorporated,
Yeah. Yeah.
in Georgia, that usually means that the county will lose a little bit of money when they lose property because they lose the ability to charge property tax to that
Hmm.
entity. So counties are resistant. So that's inhibiting cities to do it. Even the Gwinnett delegation themselves, which are the legislators that represent a district that has some part of Gwinnett in it,
Right.
they're discussing having a rule that's setting the Gwinnett delegation rules such that if there's an annexation bill, almost like if, say, the city of Peachtree Corners wanted to allow a area contiguous to us to vote on whether they wanted to come in, say, a subdivision or something like that,
Right.
that everybody in the delegation has to vote on having it move forward, not just the ones that represent the areas of affected.
Okay.
So, we could have a legislator that barely represents Gwinnett up in like Brazelton
Right.
or unincorporated area, and the county gets with them and they're like, we don't want this to happen. We'll lose a little bit of money. And then they're like, yeah, I don't want it to happen.
Yeah, that's because of the trend of all these places like Mulberry, right? That's the newest city in Gwinnett County,
Yep.
right? It's a trend of all these cities coming into being, chopping away a little bit at that county budget. And now the county has to, fight for the budget that they need. Although they have less area to cover, well, except for the
They
emergency
do.
services. But
But remember, they're only losing a revenue stream, in this case, a millage that's charged only to unincorporated.
right,
And that's their own doing. Like in other states that don't allow that, say in North Carolina,
uh-huh,
counties in North Carolina can only charge one type of tax, and that's a property tax to everybody in the county. It's
mm,
one. They can't then create special, you know, um, you know, focused taxes that only go to unincorporated. In Gwinnett has a countywide tax that
yeah,
even you and I who live in Peachtree Corners pay, and
hmm,
that's for the countywide services like the courthouse, the jail, the health department. But
right,
then they charge very specific taxes just to the unincorporated area, parks and rec, police,
mm.
code enforcement, zoning administration.
Well, that's
They
interesting.
don't they don't have to do that. They chose to, oh, we're going to, and so it's a
So
little
wait,
bit of a self-inflicted
so,
gunshot.
so but so the county charges for parks to the unincorporated,
Yep.
but we have parks here in the city, but we're not paying for that fee.
No, you're
Okay,
paying for it.
okay, we are paying for that.
Just like police, once we
Okay,
became a city, we allowed Gwinnett to keep charging that in our city
yeah,
limits
right.
in return for them to continuing to operate the
Okay,
parks.
okay, all right.
So
So Yeah, so we should probably buy those parks and just take over the whole
Take
system.
over the millage.
Um, all right, so drone regulation. I think you mentioned there was drone regulation. I know a lot of people that fly drones around here, and certainly there are roofing companies that will do the drone thing and check your roof and stuff and show you where the damage is and stuff like that. Building inspectors do that to some degree. So there's also and people, just individuals going around to town green and doing his own drone. And so there's legislation up, maybe, right? And part of that is probably because of all the drone stuff and the unidentified UAPs up in New Jersey that everyone went crazy on, whether it was Chinese or Americans, or now we understand the FAA allowed some of that to go on. It's like one of the things that just came out. So, but
Yep.
who knows, right? Could it be aliens? Could it be foreign governments or our own? I mean, there's so many conspiracy theories that we're tracking nuclear weapon transportation into different places. And it's just like you could go crazy. So what's going on with the drone legislation here in Georgia?
Yeah, so this actually isn't bad. Although, by the way, you laugh about it could be anything, which
Um,
in a lot of cases you're like, really? But you do have to give some of those like, tinfoil hat crowd
mhm.
some a little bit of latitude because we did have what is it? Yeah, what do they call it? Stratospheric
Yes, those
balloon.
balloon. Yeah, yeah.
I mean, so there are some unique things
I
that
mean
happen
that,
out
that
there.
yeah, and that one was very unique. That was a huge one from
Yes, I
China,
mean it
right?
was in the stratosphere purposely, you know.
Going across. And they had
Yeah, I
solar
mean,
panels too. They were powering with
yep.
solar panels too. So it was like the whole big thing. Yeah.
I mean, so, but in this case, yes, there is a Georgia legislator who, with the whole thing that was happening up in the coast of New
Mhm.
Jersey and everything, was like, we should give local governments better ability to control unidentified aerial vehicles. And
Interesting.
so in this case, the bill is allowing the local government to regulate drones below 400 feet.
Well, because the FAA takes care of drones of a certain weight and higher, where
That's
if you have a
correct.
large drone,
Correct.
you have to actually get a number um,
Correct.
for that drone.
And have a FAA license, a
Yeah.
pilot's
You
license.
have to actually take a course, get that
Correct.
license. So me as a commercial, let's say I wanted to fly my own drone as a business, because I'm going to shoot drone shots. I want to
Yep,
use it for the magazine and stuff. I actually have to be licensed or use someone that's licensed to do that.
you do.
But
And
that's a
for our concerts, we use a third party, firm to shoot video of it. And you've
right.
seen some of the video we've had on that.
Nice
The
stuff.
drone operator who does the filming for it,
Mhm.
he has a license and he has to get a permit from the FAA
Yeah.
to be
But
able to fly it.
but only because I think it's by the FAA does it by weight versus by height. There is a height,
There is a height.
but it does by weight versus because most of the stuff that a person like you and me would buy is under that weight requirement. But you're saying that that legislation would then cover even those drones?
Only if they're going to be over public spaces in which there's a public gathering, which I believe they define it as 50 people or more
Mhm.
that are the plan that plan to be around each other for more than 30 minutes.
Really?
And so that would be where, all right, now we don't want there to be unidentified drone activity. That is where you get into, because even for our concerts, Rico,
Yeah.
even below a certain height, the FAA regulates it because there's so many people.
Right. But if I was a if and I've seen lots of photographers do drones also because
Yep.
it's part of that thing.
Yeah.
They'll go along the river, which is it wouldn't be it's above a public place, but there's no people there maybe, or there are not enough people like you're saying. So that's a reasonable thing, I guess. That's not covered by that probably. Um,
No, I mean, I think this is really more of public space where there's a gathering of the public of more than, I think it was 50 people who are planning on being there for more than 30 minutes. Then, and
Yeah.
only then, would the local government be in a position to say you still need to identify who you are if you're going to be flying below 400 feet.
So,
FAA, they're still above 400 feet is still out of our control.
so if it's a private party in someone's backyard and they have a drone, they want to fly it up and, do that, that's okay, I
But
guess.
that wouldn't, yeah, because that wouldn't be on public property.
Right. Okay. Private. All right. Oh, well, I guess that all makes sense. Although I
And
can,
again, trust me, this wasn't our legislation. I'm just
yeah,
telling you the
yeah,
unique things. I mean, every day as I'm going through the bills that hit, just to see, and
yes.
our lobbyist is giving me, a heads up on, hey, how does this affect you? I oftentimes have to tell them, hey, this wouldn't be good. So
Mm,
if you're in a position to tell a legislator or the bill's author,
yeah.
some cases to say, hey, can you tweak it to whatever? We've had to have bills tweaked that would have inhibited our ability to have innovation get tested here in Curiosity Lab because it was a prohibition against certain activity across all sidewalks. And we were like, time out. We need to have so we've had a Curiosity Lab carved out of legislation before. We've had the bill language get tweaked before, and we've certainly done things to, completely help, you know, a bill to its demise because it would have been harmful to us. In some cases, just us, or other cases, just all cities. So it's a
Interesting.
it's a
Interesting. So
dangerous
many,
time.
yeah, so many aspects of governing a city and what you all
Yeah.
have to do. There is some good, stuff though too. So let's celebrate something as well that the sheriff um, department, I mean
No,
the marshal
Marshall. Yeah.
department, sorry, sheriff marshal. Um, the marshals did find some interesting illegal things going on in the city of Peachtree Corners. So
Yeah, so this is a good story that does reflect the fact that when you're able to have more time, resources, and intimate knowledge of an area, you can oftentimes uncover things that you couldn't were you not in that position. Our marshals um, were able to uncover what was, and I believe they only had operated it one or two times before he got involved, but a legal nightclub that was operating essentially like speakeasies used to operate back in the day, which is they found a location. I don't want to get into the exact location
sure,
right now because it's citations have been issued, but it hasn't actually been,
because it was a commercial.
litigated or yeah, in municipal court. But found a location in which they could have a retail storefront,
Hmm.
but then the storefront was very, call it shallow and small.
Hmm.
And then there was a door both through at the back of that and a side door in which, you know, 2/3 of this lease space was actually an illegal nightclub, hookah lounge, you name it,
Mm.
but had not gotten anything permitted. They didn't have plans that reflected this, so they were in violation of a building permit. They hadn't filed for a business license. They didn't have a license to serve alcohol, so the state's Department of Revenue was involved. And they also, the fire code had them limited to like 60 people based on the square footage, and they were, having 200 plus people. And our marshal's intelligence, you know, network was able to then uncover the underground, call it, marketing
Uh-huh.
that this place was doing. And they were running a full on club,
Wow.
but like a black market club. And had it not been for the marshal's ability to, you know, dig into this, they probably would have kept going. And, oftentimes and there's no houses near this, so you didn't have that aspect that could have come up. But
Mhm.
the danger of these kind of clubs, whether they're the ones that move around periodically or the ones that try to keep it quiet, are there's a reason that they're trying to keep it quiet.
Mhm.
So these types of clubs generally have people that enjoy them,
Yeah.
and well, at least maybe not a majority of them, but there are people that only like to go to clubs that are kind of secret because they're wanting to do things that the law doesn't allow them
Yeah.
to,
Right.
and that oftentimes can end up in violence
Right.
and other criminal activity. We may have averted that happening at this one, but why it was significant is there was a lot of money. This is not a open a door and then there's this big room with some
Mm.
tables and chairs. This is a full-on outfitted, like remodeled
Amazing.
nightclub
Wow.
that was operating like in fact, the name of it was the Secret Lounge.
Amazing.
And
Th-
so, kudos to them,
Yeah.
and others from the city attorney.
Yeah.
Gwinnett County PD
Involved.
supported this effort, but was our marshal, led by our marshals, identified by our marshals, and city was able to keep it from continuing to operate. So there are good things. We may have averted a disaster here,
Yeah, it's great that
but it is.
they're doing a lot of good work out there. And all the technology that's coming in, I mean, that certainly helps too. Um,
And Enrico, just talking about drones, why don't we put up a drone to look at the traffic migration in this area to kind of help build our case, our evidence against the owner, because we didn't want the owner to be like, what are you talking about? Or I haven't had anybody come over here yet,
right.
whatever. So our marshals continue to use drones as a very effective law enforcement tool. So they definitely have their place.
No, for sure. And I've listened to some of the stuff that some of the products and tools of the trade, if you will, that they've investigated. Some really cutting edge stuff. So
Yeah.
it's all good. I think the city certainly gains by that. So you all, I mean, listen, you all do a good job out there. So um, well, we've come to the end of our time. We've
Yep.
covered quite a bit. So Brian, I appreciate you doing this with me.
Well, always my pleasure. Appreciate you providing this communication vehicle for those who listen and watch can learn about some things that aren't necessarily always we're not necessarily always able to include in things like city council meetings or whatever, because this is kind of the day-to-day type
Mhm.
of thing that oftentimes people don't realize goes on behind the scenes here. So I appreciate you letting our citizens have this opportunity to hear what is going on behind the scenes.
Absolutely. Love doing this. I love getting the word out. I don't always agree with everything that goes on, yeah, but the good part is that we can talk back and forth about this
Yep.
and get out, the facts and ask questions because I don't know everything, so I'd like to ask lots of questions too on this stuff. So I appreciate you doing this. Everyone else, certainly, subscribe, like the page. You'll get notified when we have more podcasts. We try to do this on a regular basis, like every month or every 5 weeks. Usually after a city council meeting, this way we could discuss what just happened, let's say Tuesday of this week, um, or the sessions like that's going on in the Capitol. So if you have questions, let me know. If you have questions for Brian, he can be reached at the city. Obviously, go to the website, peachtreecornersga.gov, and you can find a way to reach that. Or put your questions in the comments. If you're on Facebook listening to this, or X, or YouTube, our YouTube channel. And if you're getting this off Apple or any of the other podcasts, just reach out to Peachtree Corners Magazine, Peachtree Corners Life, and we'll answer those questions. Again, thank you for our sponsors, EV Remodeling Inc. and Vox Populi. You'll find their information in the show notes. So thanks again, everyone. Appreciate you being with us.